everybody, now we will learn the theory about pronunciation. And the pronunciation sometimes is difficult for non-native speakers. Sometimes a non-native speaker will pigeonize their articulations. Pigeonize means localize, means make the accent very clear in their pronunciation. So I have done a research about the pigeonized articulation, and it's an exploration into Chinese problematic pronunciations. And this book has been published on ERIC of the United States. Perhaps it is inevitable that non-native speakers' English articulations are displayed with their local accents, which are usually based on their mother tongues or dominant language. For example, English. However, fluency in English pronunciation and communication is still achievable by these groups of speakers in other and expanding circles. In those two circles, English is applied as an official language for many nations, or a language for education instead of daily life. Therefore, the sounds that are not as natural or standard, due to English is a global language, most elite in those two circles needs to learn how to communicate fluency and comprehensibly by reducing complications that they naturally encounter due to the reason that they are non-native speakers. So this study introduces how the non-native speakers can talk by reducing their problematical sounds that do not include in their mother tongues, as well as their first language. It asks how people around the world can understandably communicate by simplifying sounds, which phonetics are facilitated and replaced by pigeonized sounds. Also, what are the characteristics that Taiwanese students achieve their fluency, and that is which sounds are usually localized by the non-native speakers in Taiwan. And the strategy is to pigeonize articulations by discriminating some challenging phonetics that cannot be found in their mother tongue. For example, haka or hoklo. In truth, numerous phonology studies, such as co-articulatory reinterpretation of a low-phonic variation by Mikawa, suggested that non-native speakers are able to eliminate or reduce their accent variables in their pronunciations. And in order to upgrade young Taiwanese speakers' English pronunciation to become more fluent, as well as to achieve higher semantic comprehensibility by international listeners, it is important to investigate common pronouncing problems in articulating standard and native-like English. And this study points out 5 major non-conforming non-native types. This research implies that this contemporary globalized multicultural world, non-native likeness can be appropriate for adult English speakers. And the key words of this study is pigeonized articulations, phonetics, discriminations, reparendi, interlingual, neuropsychology. Okay, so introduction of this study, let's talk about the phonetic discriminations. Non-native speakers of English, especially speakers from peripheral cultural circles, can realize that they articulate English phonics in various ways are difficult. So they will alter some ways in order to communicate in academic settings. Articulating plans can be flexible due to a series of individual reasons, such as language differences and pragmatic motivations, informational quantity measurements, or physical structural diversities. Therefore, ESL speakers might pronounce all vowels as four vowels, rather than employing the stress reduction to shrunk. Characteristic of Native American English speakers, such as television, may be produced as a television rather than television, suggested by Garner in Calvet Descriptive Phonetics. So, Torreira and Ernestus in the article Vowel Elision in Casual French think that the reduced form typical of casual connected to speech, such as English Ghana and Wana, can be viewed as the fossilized versions of extreme gradient reduction in frequent words, especially in the United States. Numerous lexicalized reduced form can be found in other languages as well. For example, Turkic or the Naturalic, for of course in Dutch. So pa or papa for father in Spanish. So Denham and Lobeck in linguistic field for everyone suggest that English critic forming is grammatically independent but phonologically dependent on another word. And they involve some phonological reduction as the not of do, not becoming, and to, of want to becoming, to, and the have of the could have, would have, and the should have turns to a. So become could, would, and should. So it's a kind of abbreviation. So according to Kulikov voicing contrast in consonant clusters, speech tempo might also affect in production of voicing. For example, variation in voicing duration in Russian, obstruent in prepositions was found more often in fast speech. Moreover, in Sweden, stress alteration is also an active phonological process in North Germanic language. Grade in the phonology of Swedish mentioned that, for example, a name Carol is oral turned into Carol, of which the first name Carol stress as well as the first stress disappear and the second stress on title still exists. And in Spain, Catalan has phonological abbreviation for a difference between stressed and unstressed vowel in a system, in which the seven phonetic vowel U, O, A, and E reduced to three vowels U, E, respectively. In unstressed syllable, which is ever mentioned in reconsidering erosion in grammaticalization by Shuring. Spar, in a contrastive hierarchical account of positional neuralization, argues that for a model of neuralization in which segment in neuralized positions are represented with non-terminal nodes of the contrastive hierarchy. So this means that neutralization is accomplished by deleting all values of the features of reflecting the contrast which is lost, rather than requiring segment in neutralizing position to have only the positive or negative value of a given feature. In this way, neutralization is characterized by the under-specification of contrastive feature rather than a ban on one of members of an opposition. In a constructive hierarchical account of positional neutralization, Spar means neutralization forms contain neither member of the neutralized opposition, but a third archiphonemic segment. I show that this is possible if we assume that the phonology is able to interpret all nodes of the contractive hierarchy as illicit lexical representation. So they are phonetic alongside the terminal modes which reflects the phonemes in the traditional sense. In Russian, all unstressed positions involve a loss of contrast between R and O, but the phonetic realization of unstressed segment can vary in height from A to O. Traditionally, Russian has been described as showing 2 degrees of vowel reduction based on the realization of unstressed segments according to underlying A and O. And historically, native English speakers in New York vocalized R in hold-down position, following the pattern of the prestige dialects in England, suggested the social stratification of English in New York City by Noble. However, over the past century, the prestige norm of the United States based on Midwestern American English has favored rhoticity in all positions, gradually displacing traditional New York City pronunciation mentioned by Mather in the social stratification of R in New York City. Over the past 50 years, William Labov, the author of the social stratification of English in New York City, and other linguists have investigated language change, and in particular, the role of different social factors, including age, social class, and gender on language change. The decline of rhoticity in many British accents between 16th and 18th century suggests that a deletion of rule for word final precipitated a chain of events that led to both intrusive and linking process mentioned by Cox in hiatus resolution and the linking R in Australian English. And female speakers of New Zealand English use leaning R significantly less frequently than males. This is mentioned by Hay and McLaren in R, Stanley by early 20th century. New Zealand English. As you can see, the phonological referendum as well as the alteration emerge based on the individual's needs due to diverse factors. In fact, the phonological reduction is not limited within field of linguistics, since the term accent reduction is most commonly found in business setting, where individuals or companies offer to help a sign language user reduce or eliminate their foreign accent. And in contrast, accent modification is more commonly used by speech-language pathologists who often follow a business model but with a pseudo-medical bent. Above concept has been suggested by Bering, Fraser, Kong, and Thompson in the second language accent and ethics issue that merit attention. So we will talk about the simplified variations. This article will discuss the idea that the interlocutors consciously or subconsciously avoid significant information abandonment by adopting or creating simplified, comprehensible format by their own. In truth, the phenomenon of the phonological reduction not only exists in non-native speakers speaking foreign language, but also within all languages and dialects themselves. Human beings tend to moderate problematic sounds into naturally pronounceable ones. And the brain and physical structures, such as tongue and lips, automatically apply and restore to some executable pronunciations. And in the English as the second language of immigrants fields in the United States, the word yesterday is a good example of an accent reduction, in which native speaker merge the vowels and delete or silence the bird sound, altering into yesterday in mid-sentence. For example, going to, reducing to gonna, or even further as I'm gonna reducing to I'm gonna, involves the following. First one, the reduction of full O to shrunk. Second one, change the velar to alveolar nasal. The third one, vowel nasalization. The fourth one, flapping. All of which occur in other words as well. Above concept is mentioned by Beebe in frequency of use and the organization of language. In fact, translative sounds might spontaneously appear from time to time due to national characteristic of being free and democratic. Historically, in order to distinguish themselves from the counterparts in the United Kingdom and Europe, American English speakers are less formal and have to incorporate in a variety of words and accents from Europe, Africa, Latin America, and Asia. In the third millennium, non-native speakers of English frequently use phonetic alterations, usually by ways of mother tongue fossilization and or generalization, in order to facilitate international communicative needs. In fact, some interlingua can naturally be self-monitored and developed based on balancing characteristics of first language and the other dominant of official foreign language. On the other hand, in a lingua franca as well as a common English in certain international communities, particular cultural terminologies are usually purely mentioned, such as Tai Chi in Chinese custom and yoga in Hindi sports, and kimchi in Korean cuisine. From view of world phonological reduction, from the perspective of Japanese native speaker using Japanese, a significant linguist, Miyakawa, in co-articulatory reinterpretation of allophonic variation, ever investigated some patterns in spontaneous Japanese, reporting that in standard Japanese, the phoneme is realized variably, either as an affricate or fricative. In a parallel study, Japanese linguist and introduction, Yamaguchi-san, found in a Japanese linguistic textbook can be variably realized and articulated as either zi or strong or weak, as in sundries, like in the wind or consonant. So English are reduced by Japanese. In fact, if a linguist observes Japanese people's ways of articulating the while speaking in English, simplified sounds such as the above facilitate example appear frequently. Based on the personal experience of one of these studies authors, Lin, who spent some time in served Japanese passengers as a stewardess of China Airlines, in different places like Nagoya. The orange juice is facilitated into lanes. The reason is the voice plato-alveolar fricate, also described as a voice tone past alveolar fricate, is valid in Japan. Example of neutralizations. Similarly, fish can be voiced as a hitch. Due to the labiodental fricative consonant sound, which is not included in katakana, the foreign language. A series of a symbol for words borrowed from English language, although the sound exists in Japanese language, for example, arigatou gozaimashita, and which is quite close to usually is lighter than. So long word phonology, the linguistic Kawahara in the testing Japanese long word devoicing discusses the devoicing of obstruents in the long word phonology of Japanese. It is known that voice obstruent germinates, but in Japanese long words can be devoiced, but exactly when such devoicing occur remain unclear. For example, voice obstruent germinates optionally devoiced if they co-occur with another voice obstruent. When they violate obligatory counter principle. And there are some reduction in Mandarin. Moreover, while Chinese speaks in Mandarin, their habits can be fossilized and integrate into other languages as accent in foreign language. In Mandarin, the first monosyllabic phoneme morpheme means to stress, and the second one does not. As a result, the second one should apply phonological reduction. Classically, these end with a weaker tone by neutralizing first vowel into shorter vowel like shuang. For example, 谢谢婆婆、叔叔、哥哥，好的，听好了，桌子亮亮的。So it is very simplified. And similar in German, Also, German has lexical stress and has been described as stress time, while Mandarin Chinese has lexical tone and has been described as syllable time. Chinese learners of German have both a higher proportion of vocalic intervals and higher standard deviation on some consonantal intervals, resulting from their vowels appendices and non-reduction of vowels and their slow speaking rate respectively. Also, Chinese speakers produce a larger pitch range within the vocalic intervals and can hardly vary in the intonation patterns to match different sentence types.